You're watching Central Valley Business. I'm Mike Briggs. We meet here each day to meet local business owners, those having events, those who offer services to our community, all the way from Yosemite and Mariposa, all through the valley down to Porterville and Bakersfield. And if you have a business or service you'd like to share with our viewers, please contact Central Valley Talk. Our next guest is John Rooker.
Hello.
Ron, John?
Jonathan Rooker,
Jonathan
yes.
Rooker. I don't have my glasses on because I'm vain, so I looked back and I couldn't see the name. Now, you're an attorney.
Yes, yes.
How long have you been doing that?
I've been an attorney for almost 3 years now.
3 years, yeah. And you are with a firm?
Yeah, Nuttall and Coleman. I work with Roger Nuttall and Mark Coleman.
Mark Coleman, yeah. And is there a particular kind of law that you practice?
Criminal defense. It has been a passion of mine. I love practicing criminal defense.
Now, do you get to go in the courtroom a lot or every once in a while, or is it usually settled before you get there?
Almost every day I'm in the courtroom. I was in a couple different courts today before I made it here.
Wow. So, do you get to do trials and stuff?
Yes, yes.
That's the
Several
very
trials.
interesting part.
Trials, prelims, negotiations, the story behind the story, what comes in, what doesn't come in. It gets very interesting.
Now, do you, I guess these are people who are in some sort of trouble or being accused of being in some sort of trouble.
Yes.
And they're not always in trouble.
Not always in trouble. Some of the cases get dismissed or not guilty verdicts.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are actually innocent when they get arrested. The burden to arrest somebody and the burden to convict somebody.
But giant difference. I would
Big
imagine.
difference. Yeah. And the facts that an officer can get on the scene, their job's tough. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
They got to make snap decisions on what to do.
Right.
And it's not always right. They do a great job, but nobody's perfect.
Now, and what about DUIs? Do you guys get involved much in that?
Yes, that is, I don't want to call it my specialty, but it is definitely something I've got a lot of education, particularly for DUIs.
We notice our offices are here in the Tower District. We like to frequent the local restaurants and stuff up and down the street. And we see the police just lined up, and as people are pulling out of these businesses, they're getting pulled over. Do you have any advice for somebody? Now, it's not like they're drunk. DUI isn't that anymore. Some people are, but DUI, it seems like you have a guy my size, I'm smaller, 1 or 2 drinks. I could be deemed by the new law too drunk to drive. Do you have advice for somebody that gets pulled over?
Normally,
Call you first, right?
Yeah. Normally, I don't think taking the field sobriety test is the right route to go.
So just say, no, I refuse?
That I don't believe there's any necessity to take field sobriety tests. Also,
What is a field sobriety test? Is that the thing touch your nose, or?
There's the 3 standardized field sobriety tests: the horizontal gaze, nystagmus, the walk and turn, and the one leg stand. And I went to school particularly through a course on being a student and then the instructor course on the field sobriety tests. And my recommendation would be not to take the field sobriety tests.
So you're driving along, and excuse me for putting you on the spot. I don't have a DUI. I'm the last person in the whole Tower District without one, I think.
That might be true.
So I'm driving along, and let's say I'm to be pulled over, and they come, they knock on the window, say, roll the window down. Do you do that?
Yeah,
You
definitely.
can roll the window down, and
Definitely.
they're going to get your license and registration.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the officer says, have you been drinking, what do you say?
I wouldn't answer any extra questions.
Yeah.
I've been told not to answer those questions would probably be the best answer. I don't want to answer any questions.
And some people feel if a police officer asks you a question, you need to answer, but you don't particularly need to.
No, not those questions. You can decline to answer. Be courteous. Understand they're doing a job and a job that protects society. But also you have rights, and you don't want to start convicting yourself unnecessarily.
And a lot of people, I guess, do that. Have you had anything to drink? Yeah, I had 4 drinks. That now you've just given them evidence that can be used against you at a later time. Is that
Even
right?
worse, some people underestimate the amount that they've drank,
Yeah.
and that gets charged as a VC 31 lying to an officer. And there's a separate charge.
Oh, so if you if they ask you, have you had anything to drink, and indeed you had 4 drinks, but you say, no, I didn't have anything to drink, now you've lied to an officer, and that's a new.
Yes, a new charge.
Yeah. You see those sometimes?
Yeah, I definitely. VC 31, the district attorney's office, charges them, I won't say every time, but fairly regular.
Okay. So don't lie to the officer starter. So it's best not to say anything that would incriminate you. It's just say, I prefer just to give you my license and registration, and that's it. Now,
Correct.
Does that cause suspicion that would make them say, all right, then get out of the car?
Officers are human. I mean, it would cause a normal person suspicion. It can cause an officer suspicion. So he may take the other step. But once he asks that question, he's already got a suspicion.
Got a suspicion, yeah. Good. So the officer says, I need you to step out of the car because I think you've been drinking. I want to give you some tests. You say, okay, you get out, right? Because he asked you to.
You step out when you're told to.
Okay.
You may decline the field sobriety test, and you may decline any pre-arrest chemical tests.
Okay. So now, if he's flashing the flashlight in your eyes, do you have to let him do that, or just say, I'd rather you not do that?
You don't have to perform that test.
Okay.
The horizontal gaze nystagmus is the particular
Say again,
test.
horizontal gaze and
Nystagmus.
nystagmus. And what is that?
It's an involuntary jerking of your eyes.
Yeah.
It's a test, and I'm trained as a student and instructor on these tests, and I've done them at parties on people. And when you follow the finger out to a certain space, depending on how intoxicated a person is or how much alcohol they have in their system, their eyes will start doing this, just back and forth. And it's kind of, when you see it, you see it.
Okay.
I mean, it's impressive. It's kind of funny.
So does the officer say, I would like to, or may I, or does he just say, follow my finger?
He may phrase it any different way. Different officers phrase it different. Some officers will tell people that they don't have to take the test.
So
Some
there's
just
this
ask them.
gaze test, there's the, stand on 1 foot test or something?
The 1 foot stand.
1 foot stand, or there's a breathalyzer,
There's a walk and turn as well.
walk and turn. So you could just say, I prefer not to take any of those tests, and then,
I prefer not to do anything I don't have to do.
okay. So that's not, I heard that if you say, oh, I won't take the test, you automatically lose your license.
After you've been arrested,
Okay.
then you've already consented through the DMV to get your license, that if you're arrested for DUI, that you will take a chemical test.
Okay.
So if he chooses to arrest you, or the officer chooses to arrest you, after you've been arrested, you'll be given a choice of a breath or blood test. And at that point, you have to take it to keep from losing your license for 1 year. But if you don't take it, now in California, they can actually get a warrant and do an involuntary blood draw.
But they'd have to go to a judge, get the judge to sign, and
Correct. And there's a judge on call.
on call, so you're going to get it. So you're saying you may as well do it?
At that point, it may be a good idea, depending on the circumstances, to go ahead and take it. Usually it is the best.
Well, here's a thought I've always had. If you get a DUI, aren't you going to lose your license for a year?
First offense DUI, the hard suspension is 30 days.
Okay,
And then there's a restricted license for a few months after that.
a few months, then you get your license back.
Then the
So.
license back.
Okay. So if you refuse, you're going to lose your license for a year. They're going to get the warrant and take your blood anyway. Now, here's why I don't drink and drive. I'm so squeamish about the needle. I think I'd faint if they tried to take my blood. So I'm not going to drink and drive for that one reason. And besides that, I don't believe in drinking and driving. But
It can be unsafe, but the same politicians that write the laws sign the permits to put parking lots outside of bars.
yeah,
So there's a little bit of hypocrisy going on.
yeah. Well, it's easier not to drink and drive, or to get a ride, or get a taxi, or something like that. And so let's say you get the DUI and they determine your blood alcohol is over a certain level. Now is when they call you, right?
That's when I call
You get the call.
in to determine whether you were over .08 at the time you were driving the vehicle, not at the time the blood was drawn, the breath was given.
So if they don't draw your blood for 2 hours, it's going to be different than the moment you were.
Definitely.
Okay. So now I asked you about DUI because that's really the only crimes that people I know are committing. Very few of my friends are murdering people or burglarizing or things like that. In fact, few people I know who've had a couple felonies are facing 3 strikes. I would say, it's not that hard not to commit felonies. I don't even try and I don't commit them. But what other things are there, the preponderance of your work besides DUI?
DUIs are a lot of my work. Domestic violence. I have a few homicide cases.
I've also found it
Drug
very
cases.
easy not to kill anybody.
Sometimes it tests you a little bit, but in general, you can hold back.
Now, are a lot of the homicides almost like what do you call heat of the moment kind of thing?
I won't get into what happens in my cases in particular, but there's usually reasons behind homicides: sex, money, drugs. You've pretty much named it.
Well, that's another thing I've noticed is a lot of people getting killed, they're in a situation, maybe they're buying drugs or something that the average run-of-the-mill citizen isn't getting involved in, so we don't really face a lot of the risks of homicide.
True. A lot of people in gangs kill other gang members.
Gang members, right?
There may be an innocent bystander, but it's most of the time they've chosen their life in the gang and they know what they're getting into.
Now, everybody has a right to an attorney, and that's a great thing about America, but will a judge sometimes assign a case to somebody outside the defender's office?
They do. They call it conflict attorneys. They start out with a public defender. If there's a conflict there, they may be assigned to another agency that handles the conflicts, and eventually they go to a wheel. And private attorneys can sign up on the wheel. And if they've conflicted out of the conflict offices, then it gets down to a wheel attorney.
Okay.
And there's some great attorneys. My time at the public defender's office, I worked with some great attorneys, great people. And there's great attorneys on the wheel, some of the best in Fresno. But it is to have an attorney that sits down with you and goes over your case in particular and spends the time on it. A private attorney is the best choice.
They have the time and they have a duty, I guess, to give the best representation. So let's say somebody is in trouble, thinking of getting in trouble, or in the next week or so, unfortunately they get a DUI or something. How could they reach you?
They could call the office at 559-441-0441.
Okay.
We have the website, nuttallcoleman.com.
Nuttallcoleman.com, that's easy to remember. And to reach you in particular, you just call the office.
You could call the office, or I have my own website, jonathanrooker.com.
Jonathan Rooker, that's Rooker?
Yes.
Jonathan Rooker is Jona.
Yes.
THN Rooker.com. JonathanRooker.com. He's right here in our studios at Central Valley Talk. I just got 20 minutes of free legal advice. If you want advice, just call. Do you give a free consultation?
Yeah, definitely.
Free consultation. Don't take a chance on your own. Don't go out on your own. Just talk to Jonathan. He'll tell you what to do. You might say, go to the public defender. You might say, come to me. You might say, you have no problem. You might say, give up. You're going to prison. Huh?
Yeah, I've given all different advice depending on the facts of the case. The facts make a case.
Now, before we go, sometimes I talk too much. Don't let my guests say enough. Anything you want to add before you go?
In general, my background is very unique as far as having gone through the Reserve Police Academy. I got a criminology degree from Fresno State with a law enforcement option, master's in ed counseling, my Juris Doctorate. I've been through field sobriety student and instructor course, Axion Laboratories for gas chromatography, and I'm almost done with my master's in forensic toxicology. I really keep up on the science, and it helps me with my DUI cases and my homicide cases. It all comes into play, even my drug cases. It's very important to have the scientific education behind your arguments in court.
Yeah. The other important thing is lawyers aren't just for innocent people. Everybody deserves to be represented by somebody who's smart in that field. I don't know the law. I'm not going to try to figure this out for myself. You've done a lot of cases. You have a lot of experience, a lot of education. People should get a lawyer to just make sure their rights are protected.
Yes, definitely.
Jonathan Rooker, go to nuttallcoleman.com.
Nuttallcoleman.com. Work with two of the best lawyers in the Valley, with Roger Nuttall and Mark Coleman. Yeah. Brilliant attorneys.
Great guys, too. If you're watching us on centralvalleytalk.com, we take select interviews and repost them on Facebook. So if you know somebody who needs a service or the business of one of our guests, refer them to our Facebook site. You go to Central Valley Talk, go to YouTube site. Go to YouTube, type in Central Valley Talk without any spaces. You'll find our channel and be able to look back at these interviews and services that our various guests offer. We'll be right back with more Central Valley business after this.